Good morning. It is February 24th, I believe. We're chilly again this morning. It looks like we're going to be clear. I'll show you a plant that I really like. This is red dead nettle. It's been blooming since December. I haven't seen any pollen come off of it that early, but the pollen that comes off of red dead nettle is bright blood red. You can see the bees flying with it from across the yard. It's pretty amazing. And most pollens can be identified, or all pollens can be identified by their color. You know what you're looking for. This looks like a dandelion is trying to bloom under the ice. The red dead nettle is a really neat plant. It's a weed that comes up in my garden and works as a cover crop in the winter. The neat thing with it is there's no problem with it in the summertime. So it's gone when I till. It's edible. It tastes kind of like a beet green Swiss chard mix, a kind of an earthy taste. So you can chop it up and throw it in your salads. So here's one of last year's sunflowers that the bees have been eating up. What I want to talk to you about today, just thought we'd do it outside so you don't have to stare at me and look at Tilly instead, waiting for her ball to be thrown. It's time to check your bees. For the end of February, 1st of March, and March is the hardest time on the bees. So you need to get out and lift the back of the hive and see what you've got for weight. And if they're late, you need to get feed on them. So the biggest problem is that the bees that are in there now have been there for 5 months. These are your winter bees. They're tired and they're starting to now have to go to work in their retirement years. They start to fly when they get good days. They're going out looking for pollen. As soon as they start bringing this pollen in on some decent days, they will start to rear brood. And as soon as they start to rear brood, they have another issue. The cluster will not leave the brood. So if the cluster is cold and locked up over the brood and there's no feed for them, they are going to starve to death. Even though there's feed in there, they'll move even less with the brood than they would without brood. So it's pretty important to make sure they've got feed where they are. And one of the best emergency feeding methods that I'm aware of is what they call mountain camp, where you just put newspaper on the top of the frames and pour sugar on top, just dry sugar. It does two things. It insulates them. It gives them feed right where they are. The moisture from their respiration will dampen the sugar, and it'll absorb the water and the moisture, and then they'll drink that up as sugar syrup. So if you don't get out and check them, this will be the time you lose them. I don't believe I'd be adding any pollen to this yet for pollen patties. I would just get dry sugar on them quick if they're light. Here we've got other stuff blooming, just weeds that are overwintering in my garden. Another really neat one that I like to let go to seed is my broccoli. Here you've got it still blooming and some heads ready to pop and bloom. This is just stuff that you can leave naturally in your garden to give them something when they first fly. So then the trees will start popping here soon. The alders, and here we have a lot of hazelnuts, and they'll start putting pollen on. We've got buds starting to pop here on the plums. They'll be in bloom in another week or so. So things are getting ready to happen, and the bees are going to take off. But if they don't have feed on them, and we get those cold, wet, windy days, weeks that they can't get out to get more feed, or there's no flows on, then the bees will be in trouble. The other thing I would suggest for new beekeepers is to start watching what's blooming and watching what the bees use and what they don't use. Write this stuff down. In a couple of years, you won't need that. You'll know what's going to bloom next. But right now, it's good for you to be doing the research and watching it. You'll see things blooming that you never even knew had flowers now that you have bees. So hopefully you guys can get them good check on them now. Try to pick a nice day, but don't be too concerned. You're not going to go deep into the hive, and if they're starving to death, it isn't going to matter. The only thing that getting cold is going to do inside the hive is screw up some brood. But if you can get the top off, get that feed on top quick, you'll be fine, and it'll help insulate once it's on top. If you don't have a rim feeder to get your lid up off of the sugar, use another box, an empty box. Get your feed on it, stuff an old towel in there, a burlap sack, anything, just to help them with a little more insulation, and not to just have a huge void above the sugar. This is an emergency, so go ahead and do things that you normally wouldn't to get feed on them. So anyhow, hope this all catches you well, and hope your bees are doing good. Spring's coming, guys.